r/askreddit. What is the scariest, creepiest, most disturbing thing you have ever encountered? Serious. When I was in the 3rd grade, an older kid I went to school with kept asking me if I wanted to see some cool stuff that was in his backpack. I ignored the kid at first, but after a few hours at the childcare center at school, it was a snow day, I went over with him to his bag, where he pulled out some Polaroids of a naked woman. I freaked out. He told me I was just being dumb, that it was just pornography and that it was just something totally normal. I was raised at the Mormon church, and anything pornography related was so taboo to me at the time that I ran straight to the attending teacher and told her the kid had something illegal in his bag that he showed me. I know pornography isn't illegal, but at the time this is what I believed to be true, likely because of my upbringing. He left the school a little later with the police, but not in cuffs. It was a very, very quiet transaction, and none of the other kids saw them leave out through the back hallway. I never saw him or his sisters ever again. Turns out, the Polaroids were of his 16-year-old cousin, and they were taken by his dad. You probably ended up helping that 16-year-old and others in that guy's family. It was illegal in the end. My mother always told me to close my window blinds as a kid before I went to sleep. I usually remembered, but one night I forgot. I woke up in the middle of the night to an old man staring through my window. Smiling, we stared at each other for like 10 seconds. I calmly got out of bed and walked to my mom's room. On the way there, I passed the living room and saw someone walking past our living room windows. I went to sleep in her bed and never brought it up. No, I don't like this, lol. My blinds recently broke, so now I have a constant open window facing my bed. I try not to look out of it when I'm trying to sleep at night. This story freaks me out so much. I'm gonna buy new blinds ASAP, lol. Dude, I would have screamed, shit my pants, and passed out on my shit-filled pants. As a kid, I was always terrified of looking out windows at night for this exact reason. Fuck that. Seems like you would maybe have gotten robbed. About 5 years ago, a few buddies and I went camping in Tennessee. We were on mountain bikes, so we were able to get way far out from civilization and set up camp in the middle of the woods. This was not a camping area, so we didn't run into any other people, and we were so far away from anything we didn't expect to. We all went to sleep without incident, and it was as dark can be outside with clouds blocking the moon. After being asleep for a couple of hours, I heard leaves crunching probably about 20 feet from our tent. It was obviously footsteps. I then noticed a little bit of light shining on the tent from what I assume was a flashlight. Then I hear 2 men whispering. Then I hear yell asleep in them. My instinct was to remain completely silent and I didn't make a sound. Eventually I heard more footsteps heading away from the tent until eventually I heard nothing again. Needless to say, I got absolutely no sleep after that, and I woke my buddies up about 10 minutes later to tell them. In the morning there was no sign of anybody, and we left quickly. Never figured it out. Maybe they were moonshiners trying to get to there still, and they were hoping they didn't wake you all up on their way through there. I was dropping off a rider in NJ from Manhattan and decided to pick up a couple of rides near Newark. A guy gets in my car with his family and sits in the front seat. He then turns my way and doesn't talk for like 2-3 minutes. I'm now officially creeped out and start thinking I should move a little faster. Then he starts to ask where I'm from. I'm instantly even more on alert and say Brooklyn. He says no, where are you originally from, and I'm like, dude, Brooklyn. He starts getting agitated and asks where are your parents from, and I'm like, Brooklyn. Then he screams, dude, where are they originally from, and I'm now officially terrified. His daughter starts screaming in the back telling him to stop cause he's scaring me, and to be honest, I lost all control and may have started going through reds. Not once did I even think about looking in his direction. Made a 15-minute ride in like 6 minutes, and not once was I stupid enough to mention that my family originally came from Pakistan. He started yelling at his family next and L began to regret taking rides in NJ. I was trapped in a box with a maniac and kept expecting a knife or a gun to pop into his hands any second. I was pretty happy when I pulled into a gated building and the police was there. I dropped him off, turned off the app and drove all the way back to the city without a rider. Lesson learned, no more driving in NJ. After the family got out, they smiled to each other and said works every time. Avoid Newark and Trenton. They're rough areas. Some people will try to start something for no reason. About 20 years ago, I was working at a school. A teacher was in my shared office working, and she and her recently divorced daughter both worked at this school. Anyway, her ex-son-in-law just came into the school without signing in and came into my office asking his ex-mother-in-law where his ex-wife, her daughter, was. At this time, I had only heard anecdotal, vague stuff about him, but the second he opened my office door, I was really scared. He just had this look that told me not to engage with him in any way. He tried to get his ex-wife to go somewhere with him and she refused, and he left the school. The mother and her daughter didn't show up to work the next day, and they didn't call in either. The principal went to check on them and found them shot dead along with 2 other people. We just continued to have school that day with kids talking about them being dead all day, and it was just horrible. The most dangerous point in an abusive relationship is when the victim leaves, unfortunately. That's so sad. I was 21 and just moved to a college town living in my own. I noticed my AC unit was being turned off during the day. I thought maybe it was maintenance or a faulty breaker. So I talked to property management. They couldn't figure it out. I brushed it off. Then I started coming home and there was dishes I didn't remember leaving in the sink. A cereal bowl, a fork. I had a brain tumor, so I was concerned my memory was getting really bad. Then one day while I was in the shower, I thought I heard a man downstairs. I turned off my shower, froze, and grabbed a razor. I realized the door had no lock, so I braced myself against the sink and door. I held my breath and listened. I frantically texted my high school friend who lived in the unit next door. When I heard his voice, I flew downstairs and he was staring at ammunition on my carpet. Just bullets, scattered everywhere. And this began the 3-year saga of my stalker, and we made the first of multiple police calls. So while not traditionally creepy, those bullets made my skin crawl and heart sink. I knew someone wanted to hurt me and had been watching me. Holy crap, you had to deal with a brain tumor and a stalker at the same time? That really sucks. I'm sorry that happened to you. One of 2 stories. I was house sitting for my mom in the house where my siblings and I grew up. It was common knowledge, on rare occasions, strange things would happen. On the first day, I was writing in a notepad and left it on an empty kitchen table and rested the pen on top of it. The next morning, I went to the kitchen to see the pen was on the table, but the notepad that was underneath the pen was gone. I looked everywhere for it, but it was gone. I got another notepad and left it on the table, with the pen on top, every night for the rest of the week. On the last morning, I went into the kitchen to find the original notepad was underneath the one I was using all week, and the pen was on top of the stack. What's the second one? My dad and I saw a weird dog-human hybrid while we were walking to the train station. I honestly don't know WTF we saw, but we ran. I have heard of this before. I saw this description on another Reddit thread a while back. They described it as a long, slender running dog thing that, out of the corner of their eye, looked like it stretched out into a long arm and leg humanoid form, galloped on its hands and feet for a moment, then went back into dog form when they took a closer look. Sounds creepy AF. But I have heard these descriptions a couple times by different people. When I was 5 years old, I had a nightmare. In that nightmare there was a man, and he just stood there doing nothing but repeatedly saying "you won't wake up" over and over. I was scared to the point I couldn't move. When I woke up from the nightmare, I could still see and hear my dream. He was laughing at me. I forcefully opened my eyes with my hands, but I couldn't get him out of my head. I was so frightened I was about to cry. I got up from my bed and felt my way to the kitchen where my mum was making breakfast. I tugged on her shirt bit and asked her to help me, but she just said, "Just open your eyes." I tried to show her my eyes were open. They are, but she didn't turn around and ignored me. Well, if mom wasn't going to help me, then I was. I thought if I went back to sleep I could fight this laughing man for my freedom, so I went back to bed and closed my eyes. And eventually the man and his laughing faded as I counted down from 10. Immediately I ran back out to mum, just to make sure that what happened was actually real, but she just laughed and ignored me again. To this day I have never felt so betrayed by someone. I had this kind of dream happen, but it was a clown. I was at a circus and things were progressively getting scarier, so I started pinching myself to wake up. The clown just turns to me and says, "That won't work." Which terrified me into waking up, of course. "Sorry about your mum." I was about 9 at the time and I was trying to sleep. I didn't have any curtains or any sort of window coverings. I look out my window to see a woman, grinning from ear to ear. She slowly backs away from my window, and I go ballistic and run the fuck out of my room. Needless to say, I slept with my parents for a few weeks afterwards. Looking out my window and seeing someone staring back is one of my worst fears. Reading this gave me chills. Idiot neighborhood kid who got it in his head that I somehow disrespected him, so he rounded up his buddies to kidnap me, rob and beat my ass, try to throw me into traffic, and stuff. Legit thought that's how I die. I said kids, but these guys were close to 18-19 by the time the legal stuff and court dates were done. Second is a childhood bully who I think is as close to sociopath as anyone I ever met. There's simply a frightening level characteristics they exhibit. We crossed paths against in our early 20s and he was the same disturbing person as always. For whatever reason, I was one of his main targets for torment all throughout school. I know this doesn't seem serious, but when I saw like 10 raccoons and they all started chasing me all the way to my house and I was 3 blocks away, but I ran the entire distance without stop, and after I got into my house I had a good night after that. I was at my friend's house at 9 o'clock at it was dark. Anyone who thinks this couldn't be serious has never had a bad run-in with a raccoon. They can be malevolent mothfigures and some of them can get quite big. Being startled awake early one morning as my cousin, fresh out of prison, took a baseball bat to the front door of my house, broke in through a window, and attacked me. Someone going through a schizophrenic episode and assaulting me. He believed that I worked for the government and that I was only dating him because my boss told me to. He was drunk and became verbally and physically aggressive. It was incredibly disturbing watching someone go from happy-go-lucky to dark and threatening. Edit. I am not trying to crap on mental health issues. Schizophrenia is a somewhat misunderstood disorder, and I am aware that he was not entirely in his right mind. However, he left his mark on me and I may never get better. A homeless man waking around holding a dead cat and petting it while mumbling some weird chant. My cousin works for a crime scene cleanup thing when I was 17. I needed to be an intern somewhere for a grade. I was expecting to just stay in the office, but nope. She got a call that there was a car crash accident, and when we got there was a dead teen, my age, that went through the window. The sad thing is that I knew this kid around the school. Every time I think of him I see his body, lifeless, that was hanging out from that window. Good thing about it is that the school put a memorial for him. I have a few stories. If you want another from me, say so. First one, and probably the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. Me being a teenage boy, I love gadgets. I had a pair of night vision goggles for a while, and decided to replace the batteries after like 2 years. So at maybe 2 AM if I remember, I walked downstairs while wearing them. I saw something at the bottom of the stairs. I took my goggles off to see it better. Nothing was there. I went down a couple steps and saw the figure of a young girl, maybe about 10. After knowing that what I am seeing is very unusual, I don't feel panicked, scared, anxious, etc. I was completely calm as if it was my cat dog. I take the goggles off, and she's gone once more. I get closer, maybe about 5 feet, and put them back on. She is there. I could see all of the detail of her. She was a small, white girl with brown hair. She was wearing a garden hat with yellow flowers on it. The dress she was wearing also had yellow flowers on it. Very familiar flowers. We just looked at each other for what felt like a minute. I get creeped out and go upstairs to tell me sister. I described the girl to her, and she pointed at her painting she bought from a supposedly haunted thrift shop. It's the flowers. We both then start freaking out. This was about 4 months ago. I haven't seen her again since. My dad touching a 10-year-old family friend. The thing in the closet. So, I was getting ready for bed, doing my teeth, that sorta shit. I close my closet. After I turned off my light, I turn on my speakers, music that I like helps me fall asleep, and while I'm trying to go to sleep, I hear my closet creak. I turn on my light and see that the closet is slightly creaked open. I have the memory of a fucking rock, cause I turn my light on and try to go back to sleep. Not 5 minutes later and the creak comes again. I turn on my light again and the closet is open a little more. I try to dismiss it as the wind as I sleep with the door open and try to go back to sleep. Once again, the creak is heard. This time, when I turn on my light, I see it. The thing that was tormenting me for the past hour. I walk up to the door of my closet, with a smile on my face as I open the door and it pounces on me. My cat may be small but Jesus, she can fucking scare me. My parents and I drove to the hospital one night to visit my dad's father. He passed away later that night. The next morning, the three of us started walking downstairs and halfway through, we all saw him in the living room sitting down watching the news. He turned around with a kind of blank, slightly surprised look and we were just staring at each other. Lasted maybe 10 seconds and by the time we looked back, he already vanished. Nothing close has happened since. In 9th grade my brother and I were walking to school. As we passed by a bench, I noticed a woman with a black eye and tears rolling down her face. Then when I looked back, I saw a man walking up to the bench and started yelling at her. He was calling her a bitch and a whore. The woman tried to yell back, but as soon as she did, the man grabbed her by the hair and threw her on the asphalt paved road. I turned around and just kept on walking, but not before noticing something a little off. Before I completely turned around, I noticed that the man had a fucking gun in pocket. Then he noticed me looking, so I grabbed my brother's arm and fucking booked it around the corner of an old warehouse. After that whole mess, we went to school, but throughout the entire day, I was disheveled. Finally one of my teachers noticed my awkward appearance and asked me what was wrong. I told her the entire goddamn story of what happened, even mentioning the gun. My teacher looked horrified after what I had told her. Then the day was over, and I went home. I'm 17 now, and to this day I still have fucking nightmares about that event. For months, my friend would talk about how she was super uncomfortable around her dad. I would agree and think it was a sort of men can definitely be creepy sometimes kind of thing. Turns out her dad had been sexually assaulting her, possibly only once, I'm not quite sure, ever since her mom's parents died. They died within the same year as each other and generally you can't be in the mood at that sort of time. I found out about all of this after my friend killed herself. Her dad is in jail and her mom and 2 siblings have moved a couple times in the past year since she did it. I miss her every day. We had a school friend tell us before at a Halloween sleepover of a ghost story where she was pinned to her bed and felt like someone was touching her in the middle of the night. We were all young at the time, maybe 11/12, so we all shrieked with laughter and thought it was nothing other than a scary story. Fast forward maybe 15 or so years, we've all moved on with life, gone to different schools, etc. I run into this girl on a night out. I ask how she is, how her parents are, etc. She tells me her dad died a few years ago from cancer. I offer my condolences. She replies, actually, I couldn't be happier, that evil prick destroyed my life. It was only then that a lot of things she had said and did over the years made sense. I felt so bad for not realizing when we were younger. When I was 16 my parents got a divorce and I went through the typical angst. Part of it was firmly denouncing religion and anything not explained by science. My mom, sister and I moved into a creepy old house where they both complained of paranormal instances, which I was quick to dismiss. I came home from a track meet around 7:30 p.m. on a Friday. When I came in I heard my sister hysterically laughing with her signature snort. I asked her what's so funny Taylor, and while barely speaking through the laughing and snorting she replied, just come up here, it's hilarious. I slowly walk up the creaky steps as I listened to her laugh the entire time. She kept saying, you gotta see this, come up here. When I opened the door it was pitch black and she was nowhere to be found. Then I realized that when I drove into the driveway there were no other cars, I was home alone. I then remembered my mom and sister had gone to tour colleges that weekend. I got my ass out of there ASAP. I now believe I know nothing about this world. Fuck me. That was scary AF. I got a short one from a while back. maybe 8 years ago. At the time my wife was pregnant. 2 kids were in the living room with us and 2 kids were upstairs in their bedroom with the door closed. The oldest in the room with us went to microwave something and accidentally turned on the gas stove without lighting it. A half hour later we realize what happened, so I turn it off and open some windows. A few minutes later the kids from upstairs run down screaming and crying because someone was banging on their door. They thought it was me messing with them at first, so we laughed it off. Well, at first, until they said they saw black boots and heard heavy steps in the hallway. I was downstairs the entire time. Right after they finished telling their story, the lid to the hamper came flying down the steps. No windows we open up there and there was never any circulation through the house. We left for a while to calm them down. Not terribly scary, but a little unsettling at first. My wife and I live in an apartment complex with a lot of old buildings, and we've had some strange things happen. Shortly after moving in, we were sitting in our living room and we hear a shattering noise in the room next to us. We had a flower vase in the windowsill in the next room over. It apparently just fractured at the base, for no reason at all. Another time, I was in the kitchen doing dishes. There is a shelf a little above eye level when you stand at the sink, and my wife had a small spice container sitting on the shelf, not near the edge of the shelf at all. So I'm doing my thing, and all of a sudden the container falls off the shelf, hits the counter, and lands on the floor. Again, I saw that the container wasn't teetering on the edge of the shelf, and yet it happened to just fall off. Hands down the creepiest moment was when I was in the bathroom getting ready for work one morning. I was taking a little longer than usual, and I hear my wife ask, "Are you okay?" from the other side of the door. I say yes, and I finish what I was doing. I figured she needed to use the bathroom real quick, so I was going to let her and go make my lunch while she was in there. I open the door not 10 seconds after I answer her, and there is no one at the door. I look in our bedroom, and my wife is fast asleep. My wife will sleep talk sometimes, but she doesn't sleepwalk, and I heard what I thought was her right at the door. We've come to the conclusion there's a ghost in our apartment. We call her Susie, she's cool. Edit. There are a few more stories about Susie that I can think of, and my wife has more than I do. In case anyone wants to hear a few more, nothing spectacular. Edit 2. Wow, was not expecting this to blow up like it did. Sorry for the delay in response. It was around 11 PM when I posted this originally. A few more Susie stories. Again, nothing fantastically spectacular, but here they are. We don't have central heating in our apartment, so we have baseboard heaters in all of the rooms. In the dining room office area, we had a few picture frames sitting on top of the heater leaning against the wall. I had them there because I needed to remember to hang them up. Susie knocked the picture frames off the heater and they landed about 4 feet away. My wife has younger siblings, the oldest is 12, and they like to come spend the night with us when my in-laws are wanting a night out. Her younger brother, 10, still likes a nightlight, so we use one of those Himalayan salt lamps turned down to the dimmest setting for him in the living room. So the last time the siblings were over, Susie turned the lamp off sometime in the middle of the night. We didn't even know about it until the next night, when all of a sudden we see that light turn on while we were in our bedroom. We asked my wife's sister if she turned it off in the night, and she said I woke up in the middle of the night and saw it was off. I thought one of you must have turned it off. We didn't want to freak them out, so we told them the plug must have been loose, so that's why it turned off and on by itself. We have a pool at our complex, and my wife will take the kids she nannies to the pool some days. She had one of our beach balls sitting in the dining room drying off, and she was sitting in the living room. The beach ball rolled towards her about 2 feet. Susie must have wanted to play that day. I've noticed a lot of the activity takes place in the dining room office area, which goes into both the kitchen and the living room. So either she just likes it in that room, or there's something in there she's connected to. I'll see if my wife has any more Susie stories. Susie seems to like her more than she does me. She's more active when I'm not around, according to my wife.